You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, buy some bottles, impress them girls. It's more than life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast and Who Dat. And I'm Ethan, and we're back. We're back with some main course, and I tried to hold out as long as possible. I wanted the Derek Carr news. I just wanted the signing to drop before I told my stories about him. You know, I know a little bit about Derek Carr. I know quite a bit about the Raiders, all the way back to when they were the Oakland Raiders. The reason I know so much about them is because I got a buddy that's a Raiders fan. You know, I think if you followed this podcast long enough, you probably have heard me mention that. But I guess I'll get to my storytelling on this podcast and kind of my thoughts of Derek Carr and if we do sign him. But there's some other stuff going on. You know, it's been a while since I had just a Saints related podcast. Looks like the hammer is coming down finally on Alvin Kamara, and then there's the Saints are starting to slowly do their restructures, and the entire coaching staff has been reshuffled, and Sean Payton is poaching away the coaches and assistant coaches that he likes. So there's just a lot to get into. So I guess we'll get into that right now. So can I get a menu, and let's talk about Derek Carr and kind of my thoughts and some of my stories about him. So I got one of my best buddies. He's been a Raiders fan probably as long as I've been a Saints fan, and I guess Derek Carr, he was drafted in the second round. Yeah, he was drafted second round, 36 overall in the 2014 draft. For some reason, I thought he was drafted in the 2015 draft. So and that was something until recently. I didn't realize that he was actually drafted by Dennis Allen. So that's an interesting little snippet. And my buddy, when talking to him about Dennis Allen and all that, he's you know, as a Raiders fan and as a team of a struggling franchise, and of course Dennis Allen, while he was the head coach of the Raiders, they were the Oakland Raiders at that time. He doesn't have much high praise of Dennis Allen, but once Derek Carr got there, he really really stabilized the Oakland Raiders, because their past quarterbacks were quarterbacks like, obviously everyone knows, classic like Jamarcus Russell, and I think the previous guy before that was guys like Mike Glennon and quarterbacks like that. So I mean, having a guy like Derek Carr come in to stabilize the franchise really had my buddy like juiced, you know, pumped up to have a guy that in his first couple of years, you know, he's putting up numbers like in the 2014 season, he had a 58.1 completion percentage, 3,270 yards, 21 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, quarterback rating of 76.6 and a QBR of 42.1. But they only won 13 games that year. I guess you could attribute that a little bit to Dennis Allen, but he got fired pretty. I guess a couple games into that season. He wasn't the head coach that entire season, and then there was quite a improvement on the season. He had a pretty big jump going into the next season because they went 7-9, so they won more games the next season, with Derek Carr having 3,987 yards, 32 touchdowns. So he really jumped with his touchdowns, and then he only threw one more interception, had 13 touchdowns or 13 interceptions, and then he had a quarterback rating of 91.1 and then 43.1 QBR. And then really the impressive thing is that he had four fourth quarter comebacks and 4 game-winning drives, and he was a Pro Bowler. That was his first year as a Pro Bowler. But the year I'm trying to get to is the 2016 season. And if you guys remember, this was the season that started out with, this was the game where the Saints actually, I'm talking about the Saints now. This is the Saints played the Oakland Raiders week 1. I think that was in the Superdome, and that was a shootout between Derek Carr and Drew Brees, and I think Brandon Cooks had like a 99-yard receiving touchdown, and then of course in the waning seconds of the game, Michael Crabtree had a 2-point conversion, and I just remember getting into it with my buddy, like having an argument with him leading into that game. I can't remember if it was before or after when they won, and he was talking about how that win would like catapult the Raiders into having like a good season, and I just thought that was so comical, thinking like, oh, just the Raiders beating the Saints week 1, that's not gonna change. That's not gonna be a momentum swing for their entire season, and it kind of did. But the funny thing is, so just get to his numbers real quick. He had a 63.8 completion percentage that season, 3,937 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 96.7 quarterback rating, and a 56.1 QBR. And then he had this is the ridiculous numbers here. This is probably close to a record. I think it is. I think I saw that this is really close to a record. I think only 8 or 9 is more than this. But he had 4 fourth quarter comebacks in this game. Obviously, one of those, I guess the game-winning drive, he had one of those against Saints, and then a seven game-winning drives. And then he was 3rd in MVP votings that year, 5th in Offensive Player of the Year, and then he was a second-time Pro Bowler that season. And then they went 12-13. But during my argument over saying how ridiculous it was that he thought that just that week 1 win over the Saints could catapult them into having a great season, I mentioned like, well, just any kind of injury could derail their season. Like I was like, Derek Carr could go down and that could just completely derail their season, or Khalil Mack could get hurt and go down and that could completely derail their season. I was like, a week 1 win is not a deciding factor of how your season is going to go. So what ended up happening is we kind of both ended up being right, because then in what is it, I guess that would have been week 16, because then he only played in 15 games that season. He ended up having a compound fracture on his fibula against the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts, which that I think if they would have won, I can't remember if they lost or won that game, but I think if they would have won in week 17, they would have been a two. They would have won their division at least, or would have been the 2 seed. But instead, they lost that game, and then they ended up having to go to the Houston Texans and had to play their backup quarterback. So it's not funny that he got hurt, but it's just comical. It's just a coincidence how we were both kind of right, because that week 1 win did kind of catapult them and give them momentum into having a great season, because they did end up going 12-4 and looked great. Derek Carr looked great throughout the season, but it ended up getting derailed at the very end. Just like I said, mentioning the injuries that could happen and just derail your season. Like one game doesn't make a season, unless it's the Super Bowl that you're winning, of course. But he that after winning that season, he definitely was very hyped on the Raiders and everything they did, and he always liked to compare Raiders players to Saints players. Like he even compared Derek Carr to Drew Brees a lot of the time, especially after they beat the Saints. And really, the only comparison I ever saw out of Derek Carr to Drew Brees is that he would throw like some of the most ridiculous, untimely interceptions. Like if you've been a fan of Drew Brees throughout his career, most of Drew Brees's interceptions would come at like the worst time, and they wouldn't be like usually great plays by the defender. They would usually be like lollipop interceptions. He'd usually throw them right to defenders, and it would have you scratching your head like, what was that? And that's something, if you watch a lot of Derek Carr, that's something he does. You'll see if you watched him, his team the Raiders will say tie the game up, and then the opposing team that they're playing, their defense will get like a 3-and-out or something, and it looks like the Raiders will have all the momentum, and then he'll come back out and he'll throw an interception right to the other team, and it's just like, and it just kills the entire Raiders momentum, and that's very Breeze-esque kind of in that way. And obviously he's not as big of a winner, didn't put up as big a numbers, but that's the only comparison I could see that I compared to Derek Carr, because he never came close to throwing like 40 touchdowns or passing for 5,000 yards. I guess he actually did in 2021. He threw for 4,800 yards. But yeah, and then also he would compare Amari Cooper to Michael Thomas, which that's actually a pretty good comparison. If I had to pick one of those now, I'd probably pick Amari Cooper. I'd take Amari Cooper if I could do a swap. I'd take Amari Cooper straight up over Michael Thomas. And then he loved to compare Khalil Mack to Cameron Jordan. And I'll admit, during that little 3-4 year stretch of Khalil Mack, when they were giving out Defensive Player of the Year awards and stuff to Khalil Mack, and before he got traded to Chicago, I might admit that he had spurts where he was probably a better player than Cam Jordan, but consistency and longevity, Cam Jordan's a better player than Khalil Mack, because I think Khalil Mack was drafted like in 2014, 2015 or something like that. So he was drafted a couple years after Cam Jordan, but Cam Jordan has been healthy, an Iron Man, but Khalil Mack's kind of been a little injury prone, but Cam Jordan has like 115 career sacks and Khalil Mack only has 70. So Khalil Mack kind of peaked and then kind of tapered off. So it was always kind of funny how he would compare Raiders players to Saints players, even though there was really kind of no comparison. But it was always fun. But over the years of me watching Derek Carr. I was never really impressed, you know. I never was very high on him, you know. So that if the Saints get him, I'll embrace it. I've watched a lot of Derek Carr. I think he'll be probably a slight upgrade over Andy Dalton, you know, and you definitely have heard a lot of people talk about how he how he how if the Saints get him and then he comes into the NFC South, that he'll be pretty much like hands down the best quarterback in the NFC South. And then I've heard some of the statements about how he'll be like a top five quarterback in the NFC. Like I don't know, I don't know necessarily know about that. I don't know how much people have watched of Derek Carr, but I mean, obviously he has the clutch gene. If you've seen, he has like 28 fourth quarter comebacks, 33 game-winning drives, and he has what he's a four-time Pro Bowler. But uh, after he broke, it had the compound fracture on the fibula in 2016. Even my buddy admitted he never really looked the same after that. You know, he had he had the 32 touchdowns in 2015, and he had the 28 touchdowns in just 15 games. So he probably would have thrown for 4,000 yards, and probably would have. Just estimating that maybe he would have thrown two more touchdowns. So he would have had 30 touchdowns and two seasons and back-to-back seasons in 15 and 16. But he's never even really come close to throwing 30 touchdowns again. I guess he threw 27 in 2020, but other than that, he's never really come close to even throwing for 30 touchdowns again. And it seems like that kind of derailed him. He was never really the same quarterback because he was like a young gunslinger, uh, but it just seemed, I don't know, it seemed like it maybe got in his head, and that's a serious injury, very very similar to the Alex Smith injury, but obviously he didn't get the infection, the staph infection, and having to do multiple surgeries to fix his leg. But you know, I messed with my buddy and said like I think it would be so hilarious if he did come to the Saints and then he ends up winning a championship with them, or even if he doesn't win a champion, it would just be pretty funny if he comes here and has a lot more success. You know, that say they go to the playoffs three or four times in a row. That would just be kind of comical, seeing how Derek Carr only played in one playoff game, and that was the game against the Bengals when they blew the whistle early, and obviously my buddy thought they got completely screwed over in that game. But he did lead the Raiders to the playoffs in 2016. Didn't get to play in it. But there's my thoughts on Derek Carr, and there's a little bit of my background knowledge on the Raiders. So I guess we'll talk a little. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about him if they actually sign him. But that's all I have to say about him, is that I'm not super high on Derek Carr, because even though I've seen a lot of him, I've never really been super impressed with him. Like, I, but would I be happy if they got him? Probably, yeah, I think I would, because I think it would bring stability to the team, and I think that would kind of open things up for them going into the off season and off season free agency and the draft, and I think it would be a more stable option than Andy Dalton. But I think for now that's enough Raiders talk and enough. Well, I say that's enough Raiders talk, but I think I'll probably be talking about them more here in just a second. I might maybe on the last subject here. But that's enough about Derek Carr for now. Let's talk about some interesting subject that's been going on for the past year or so, all the way back to last year's Pro Bowl. And this is I'll read this article off for you, everybody here. And this is the grand jury indicts Alvin Kamara and three others in Las Vegas nightclub beating. And so a Clark County grand jury has indicted Alvin Kamara and three others in alleged beating at a Las Vegas nightclub last year. Kamara, a running back of the New Orleans Saints, Cincinnati cornerback Chris Lemons, and two other men face criminal charges connected to an incident at a strip club on February 5th, 2022 during NFL Pro Bowl weekend. No, is that a strip club? That's the first time I've heard that it was a strip club. For some reason, I thought it was outside of a strip club. For some reason, I thought it was like in the lobby and the lobby and elevator of a casino. That's the first time I've heard anything about a strip club. Oh, okay. I'm reading it to you. This is the first time I'm reading it as well. The grand jury indicts the four men Wednesday on charges of conspiracy to commit battery and batteries resulting in substantial bodily harm. The victim is Darnell Green, told Las Vegas police that he was waiting outside an elevator of Dries, I don't know, Knights Club, along with a group of people, including the four suspects. When some elevator doors opened, Kamara put his hands on the victim's chest and stopped him from entering the elevator, police said. So we've heard most of the story. Okay, I guess it keeps Green has the article keeps going. I guess it showed a picture and blurred out picture and video of Darrell Green. I'm sure you guys have been following the story enough. You've seen the picture of his swole up bloody face. Pretty bad, honestly, I'll admit. Green has filed a civil suit in Louisiana. The video and audio recording taken in an SUV has, after the report assaulted, has not been released. The lawsuit, what it says, the video and audio recording taken in an SUV after the assault. Okay, I was about to say, I seen a video of it, like from the back above the elevator. The lawsuit includes still images from surveillance videos and transcripts of the recording. Immediately after the vicious beating, Kamara bragged about it with a member of his group, stating, "I connected with the expletive jaw so hard," the lawsuit claims. Kamara chased Green down the hallway and proceeded to strike him multiple times until he was knocked to the ground. The lawsuit said, "I didn't see him chasing him to the ground, chasing him down the hallway or anything like that." From the video I saw, he was pretty much just like right there in front of him. But still, if that was actually Alvin Kamara, the lawsuit said, at no point during the attack did Green hit, punch, or push Kamara or any of his associates. The NFL has not commented on the incident, and Kamara or Lemons played in 2022-2023 season. The state has avoided to contest preliminary hearings by indicting Mr. Kamara. His attorney, David Chesnoff, Drew Findling, and Richard Schofield said in a statement he intends to vigorously fight the allegations at a trial. He was defending himself and others at the time of the incident. The indictment means the criminal case will immediately bypass Las Vegas Justice Court and move to district court. The judge set court dates for March 2nd. So this just seems like they're finally moving ahead in the process instead of just moving the court dates like they were during the regular season. And, I said that I kind of was okay with them doing that during the regular season because because of Alvin Kamara's age. He was, let's see, this year was his age 27 season, so he'll be going into his age 28 season. And I don't know what kind of suspension will come out of this. because it's the Saints and because it's Alvin Kamara and because there is video evidence. There's pictures of a pretty beat up man from it, and they let Deshaun Watson only be suspended for 11, 12 games for all the sexual assault stuff, and then they suspend Calvin Ridley for an entire year for for the gambling. I wouldn't be surprised if Alvin Kamara gets suspended for 8 games or more because of this. But I think the Saints need to get younger at the position, anyways. Like Alvin Kamara, he had a better season than he did last year. He had about the same amount of rushing yards, almost exactly the same amount of rushing yards. He had 800, 800, 900, 898 yards rushing the previous year with a 3.7 yard per carry average, but only 4 touchdowns. And then he had 897 yards rushing, so just 1 less yard. But he had his per carry average was better. It was a 4-point carry average. That's what you want. You want at least 4-point yards per carry. But only 2 touchdowns. That was what was so crazy about this running game. The running game was just not very impressive, considering he had seasons like in 2020 where he had 16 touchdowns, and in 2018 he had 14 touchdowns. And then you look at his per carry average, like his rookie season, he had 6.1 per carry average, and then 2020 had a 5 yard per carry average. So I mean, just because he's going into his year 28 season, and just running backs decline, and obviously his yard per carry average proves that. It's pretty much gone down every season for the most part since his rookie season. I mean, he had a 5-point yard per carry average in 2010, and then it's pretty much gone down since then. So, I think the Saints need to get someone maybe in the second round or second or third round, or their first round pick is just the 29th pick. So if the top running back is still on the board at that pick, maybe you draft the number 1 guy at that pick and hope you can get younger there, because Alvin Kamara was always kind of, in his first couple of years when he was splitting carries with Mark Ingram, or even when he was splitting carries with Latavius Murray, he was like a striker. He was kind of like the guy, like after Mark Ingram and Latavius Murray beat down the defense, he would come in and catch them off guard while they were like winded and stuff, and pick up big gains and big runs and stuff. And he hasn't really had any big gains or big runs this season for touchdown. The last couple of years for touchdowns. In the last 2 seasons, his longest runs have been in 2021. He only had a long of 47, and then last year he had a long of 57. But the previous 4 years, he had run every season. He had a run of 80 yards or more. His first 4 seasons. So that's just clear decline. So that even if he does get suspended, which I imagine he probably will, just like when I was saying during the regular season, I'll be okay. I'm happier that it's coming in his year 28 season than in his year 27 season. So, it's sad that it looks like you can kind of see what's coming down the road, but it happens, and it's business. It's time. I think it's time to get younger and faster and stronger at the position, and definitely need to have more production in the touchdown area. You can't say a lot about wanting a guy to rip off 60+ yard runs all the time, which was what Alvin Kamara was doing in his first couple of years, but definitely need more production in the touchdown category. So that's my thoughts on the Alvin Kamara story. So there's definitely stories all to be had, seeing how I took off as much as I did. So now then, on to Marcus May And let's see if I can pull up. Let's see. Yeah, let me pull up his stats real quick because I was not impressed with his stats all this much. I think he had a bad season, not necessarily because he was a bad player. I think when he played, he was good, but he's just showed that he's injury prone. Honestly, he's kind of I'm glad they didn't pay him like Jarius Bird, but he kind of has that Jarius Bird kind of feel about him. He never was the ball hawk that Jarius Bird was, but he just has that injury prone. He's kind of an injury prone safety. Like you let a guy go like Marcus Williams, who was kind of an Iron Man, maybe miss 1 or 2 games here, and then you go out and sign a guy that's in 2018 only played in 6 games. In 2021, the year before you sign him, only played in 16 and is coming off a horrific knee injury. And then in 2022 with you, only plays in 10 games. So I mean, it's kind of like that's like the same story with letting. I think I have a whole podcast talking about how it's like Groundhog Day. You let a Iron Man like um, Malcolm Jenkins go, and then you sign Jarius Bird, who's had a history of being injury prone. It feels very similar to the Marcus Williams and Marcus May thing, that story. But anyways, it looks like they're gonna Mark. It looks definitely like Marcus May will be back with the team this year, and hopefully he can stay healthy because he was good. I would say out of everyone on the defense, when he played, he was a great run stopper and probably one of the better tacklers on the team because even in the 10 games he played, I mean, he was not a ball hawk. He had the one great forced fumble that helped seal the win and helped them win the game against the Falcons week 1. But that's about all he attributed in that area. Had no interceptions, only 2 pass deflections, but he had 60 tackles, 42 solo, 18 18 assists, but no tackles for loss, no quarterback hits, no sacks. Definitely nothing to write home about. But what I'm trying to get to, I'm just trying to get to what I'm trying to say here is that he definitely will be on the 2023 roster because that they did a they're starting to work on these contracts and they're starting to restructure and make money. So if they're doing that and they're converting salaries to signing bonus, then that means they're going to be on this roster. And that's what they've done. He's the first player that they've come to and done this with. So this is what the Saints have done. Saints have converted six point 6.07 million of safety Marcus May's 2023 compensation into a signing bonus, creating 4.856 million in cap space per source. So he will be with the team next year because of that. And I think the next player that I've seen that they're trying to that they may be working out something like this is Ryan Ramczyk. So uh, they're slowly trying to get down. Last I looked, they're like 60 million over the cap. So this gives them close to 10 million, 6 million, 6.07 million in cap relief. So that's a pretty big chunk. That's quite a big chunk in getting started. But it looks like I don't want to say it looks like we're stuck with Marcus May because he's not a good player, but he's just shown he's kind of injury prone, you know. But he'll definitely be back. And it'll be interesting to see what they do in free agency, whether they add another safety because both the safeties they have that were their starting safeties in Tyrann Matthews and then him both will be I guess he'll be 30 and I guess Tyrann Matthews will either be 31 or 32. So, and then Justin Evans and those other guys they had were definitely not impressive when they had to fill in. So it'd be interesting to see if they added another guy in free agency or if they try to draft a guy in the first 3 rounds or what they do because of that. But that's what we have to say about that. Now then, talking about the Saints and their coaching staff changes and and uh, and Sean Payton poaching away the other guys that have been leaving and guys that were on the staff that weren't leaving and just the whole transition. And I've said this, man, with all the guys that Dennis Allen has brought in and and his relationship with these guys, it seems like most of these guys kind of have ties with with his time when he was in Oakland with the Raiders. And I just said, man, I just need to put an eye patch on. I swear, I just need to put an eye patch on, or someone needs to Photoshop an eye patch over the Florida Lee, or do a meme where there's a eye patch over the Florida Lee, or like the final transaction that needs to happen to basically make the New Orleans Raiders, the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Raiders, is to sign Derek Carr, because it seems like the majority of these guys that have come here now have ties to the Raiders and obviously Dennis Allen, because these are all Dennis Allen guys for the most part. So now there's a new defensive coordinator in Joe Woods. They have a new secondary coach in Marcus Robinson, and that's the guy that I've heard a lot of people have the most high praise on, because he's a younger guy, kind of like Chris Richard, and I think he was the secondary coach for the Arizona Cardinals last year, which they were good. The Saints found that out last year, throwing 2 pick-sixes against them, and they had Buda Baker and some other really good players over there. So I think that was probably, out of all the assistant coach pickups, that was probably the best one. Honestly, it was Marcus Robinson, the secondary coach, and I think a lot of people compared him to being kind of a young and up and comer to Chris Richard, even though I think he's younger than Chris Richard. And then they D line got Todd Grantham, and then tight end Clancy, tight end coach Clancy Barron, and then offensive line assistant Kevin Cranberry. So, and like I said, all these guys have some sort of ties to Dennis Allen. I don't think necessarily all of them have ties to the Raiders, but I think a good portion of them do. And then talking about Sean Payton and how he's kind of poached away some of the Saints coaches and things, and assistants and coaches, and just like the Saints are becoming the New Orleans is becoming the New Orleans Raiders, the Broncos look like they're becoming the New Orleans the Denver Saints, honestly, with how they have Sean Payton now, and then the Sean Payton poached away Zach Strief to be the Broncos O-line coach, and then they got Declan Doyle to be their tight end coach, and then those are the 3 coaches that they got. The 2 coaches that they got from the Saints was Declan Doyle and Zach Strief. And then I've seen here recently that they're interested in maybe interviewing Chris Richard to be their defensive coordinator. If not him, the other top candidate is Rex Ryan. And I would love to see that. I think that would be awesome if Rex Ryan would end up being the defensive coordinator. I think that would just be fun. And then obviously the Saints have lost Ryan Nielsen to the Falcons as their defensive coordinator, and Dan Rocherer went to Tulane to be their O-line coach. But so at least he stayed in the city, stayed in the state at least. So those are, but my thoughts with just a complete turnover of the assistant coaches and things like that is, uh, uh, Dennis Allen, he's got to bring in his own guys. He can't be living under, continuing to live under the thumb of Sean Payton and his coaching staff, So he's got to bring in his guys, the guys that he feels comfortable with. So, and maybe some of these guys are like Marcus Robinson have some higher potential than Chris Richard and Ryan Nielsen. And I mentioned that a lot of people thought the Ryan Nielsen loss was a big loss, but honestly, I think as a coach, he kind of underachieved the last couple years with Peyton Turner and Marcus Davenport and the defensive tackles that have been here. Like, yeah, they've been great at stopping the run, but they took a big step back last year, and it was really surprising that the Saints even had 50 sacks this year, even though they didn't have a guy with double-digit sacks. But I guess Mario Davis had like 7 or something, but that's a linebacker, not a defensive lineman. But I guess I'm okay with these signings. He's Dennis Allen. He has no excuse now because he's got his guys here. So we'll have to see if now that he's got his guys here, if that changes anything. And I guess, like I said, the last move to really turn this team into the New Orleans Raiders is to get Derek Carr and put the eye patch on the fleur-de-lis and just see how it goes. And I guess some people, the only change that wasn't made that people wanted to be made is to change the offensive coordinator position of Pete Carmichael. So that's just kind of the weird one. But I really just don't think there was really any top candidates out there. Most of them already got signed, or you've just kind of maybe taken a risk on a young guy. I think a lot of people thought about Eric Bieniemy, but I think for him that's kind of a lateral move. And well, why would you want to go to the Saints when they don't even have a quarterback yet? So it should be interesting to see how that plays out now that he has his own coaching staff, and be interesting to see if there's some improvement on the D line and maybe in the secondary with Marcus Robinson as the new secondary coach and Todd Grantham as the new defensive line coach, and even Joe Woods as the defensive coordinator. Even though I think it's pretty clear that he's that's just kind of a title more than an actual position as an assistant coach, because I think it's pretty clear that Dennis Allen is still going to be calling plays. But that like I said, there was a lot to get into on this show, but I think that's all I have for you guys this evening. And with that, who dat? And can I get a check, please?